Okay, we're live. So thank you, Dmitry, for agreeing to have this conversation. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about, as we always do. And the questions that the points that you shared with me in the messages that we exchanged when you were in Italy on your vacation sounded so interesting that I really appreciate the opportunity to ask you even deeper questions about those points. Just before we started recording, you were saying that you found yourself wanting to help, or like that we're both coaches, so niche is something that is always kind of, we're always looking for who are we helping with what. And you said you found that you are helping high achievers with anxiety, and because people want to perform, but also they don't want to perform from a stressful and really pushy place where they have to push themselves. So I'm curious, what have you found? What is the alternative? If somebody asks you, like, okay, if I don't perform from that place, what is the alternative to pushing myself? What else can I do?
Yeah, that's a big one. One, thank you for just even initiating this conversation. I always love our conversations. My girlfriend asked, how long is this call going to be? I don't know. We can talk for hours. Right? It's like when we enjoy what we do. What is the alternative? So you did mention flow, right? And in a way, that's what I find the balance between the two of both being in joy, doing what we love, but also having the motivations, like the balance between having the motivation to improve where we are and change where we are, while also loving where we are right now and loving who I am right now, because I know who I'm going to be 20 years from now is going to be a different person. It's going to be, much more expanded version of ourselves. But me being right now is the most amazing place to be. And in a way that we're here to experience this journey to this mastery that I don't want to just get to when I'm 60 years old, having all the money and having already done all of this, not having actually experienced it and only having a memory of it. So it's like, it's not the race to get there to the finish line. It's like, okay, I'm actually here right now and I want to be here. And from this place, there's something that I want to do inherently as my gift, both to the world and to myself. And to me, when I open up to this, right, I was driven to this, I gotta achieve, right? It's like I gotta get there, and this having constant gap between where I am and where I could be, never enough. Complete the goal, bigger one gets set. Complete the goal, bigger one gets set. So it's like a never-ending race. So the balance is that having motivation and loving where you are. I think it's the simplest way.
Having motivation, loving where you are. What is the motivation then if you're loving where you are? Like, why do
exactly
things?
Yeah, that's a good one. Essentially, it's a weird conversation. I'd like to bring up in my men's group journey. We had a question: how do you feel 1 to 10? And it was interesting for me. Like we had, sometimes when we have like bigger meetings, like hundreds of men around, and it has been an average to be a 7 out of 10. That people would feel 7 out of 10. And for me, at that point, I still haven't dipped into my shadow and darkness. I was actually happily performing and being motivated. And I was like 9 out of 10 most of the time. And then one man, and kind of was frank and open conversations. He says like, dude, like if you're always 9 out of 10, like, do you feel like this is the best you can do? Right. And it's an honest question. It's like, well, if you feel like you're there now, like, where you're like living where you are and like you're, having the relationships that you have, is like, well, you don't think you can do better. Right. So it's like, this is the in a way, high achiever mindset. And that, well, if you are where you are right now, then in a way you're a loser, like you're not driven, you're not motivated. So I definitely understand and appreciate where the question is coming from, because that was me as well. It's like, how can I love myself or if I love myself, I'll lose all of my motivation. So in a way,
Yes.
to answer that, right, it's like, then what is the motivation? Then the motivation becomes not to reach for an outcome,
Mhm.
but the motivation becomes, what do I feel most inspired to do right now for the sheer exploration and curiosity of where that's going to lead me?
Mhm. It becomes not a goal to get to experience some good feelings or in search
Later,
of them, but
tomorrow, right?
sometime in the future, which never really arrives because there's a new goal and a new goal, but rather coming from those good feelings now and doing what you're inspired to do, but not in search of something.
Mhm.
Yeah. I find it so interesting that so I was just reflecting recently that dissatisfaction, and I don't know if we realize that, but dissatisfaction is so common, such a common experience in many people's life. We get to a goal, we get a sense of satisfaction, and then immediately we feel dissatisfied again, and then we go after another goal. But I think because everybody lives this way, we don't ask, is this the same way to live? Is this the only way to live? And what you're saying is that instead of searching for something in the future, you experience it now, and then you express yourself from that place of love towards yourself, towards your life, and then following your inspiration.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually a paradox for the mind to get that I actually do want to change something,
Mm.
and I love things how they are.
Yeah. Can the mind really grasp it? Because it sounds such a kind of, it's a contradiction. It almost sounds, right?
Right.
It's definitely a different place to come from, as in many people's experience. I love where I am, and it doesn't mean that I don't have to stay this way forever.
Mhm. Both both learning to love where we are because we want to get somewhere where
Mm-hmm.
there's more money, more happiness, more closer relationships, etc. And also, if I love where I am, it's okay if things change.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our parents grow older, we grow older, our kids grow up, our businesses change, like all of the stuff that you know the mind doesn't want change, it wants comfort, yet change is the only constant there is. So
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's such even logically, it's such a, I mean, same place to live your life from. When you are accepting where you are, it makes it so much easier to initiate change rather than initiate it from a state of discontent and trying to get to some place. Um, so what do you think? What do you think prevents people from initiating change from that place of
yeah,
feeling content with their life?
yeah, I think it has a lot to do with, one, what is the bigger overarching purpose for why we're here? Because we're told from the very early stages, right? It's like when we're little, and I'm sure this would be the experience for most high achievers, I would say, most
Mm-hmm.
people who are motivated to go for this stuff, right? Because a lot of people, they're satisfied where they are. They have amazing loving jobs, amazing loving families. They coach soccer teams and like being in the community on the weekends. Like those people, they love where they are, and they may not be as motivated to bring change.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess here the conversation specifically is for these high achievers who are not feeling enough and who are inspired and motivated and driven to grow the business and make a difference in the world and do all of that. So in a way, we are talking about people who are motivated yet lacking right now that healthy basis foundation of community relationships and health
Mm-hmm.
and just loving yourself, right? So um kind of what I wanted to say about that, when I'm not happy where I am, kind of I lost the train of thought here. you remember the question you asked?
Yeah, I was, and it may not be an easy question to answer because I think it requires some. I mean, the question basically was like, what helps, what prevents people from leaving from that place of contentment?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I wanted to mention that we're talking about high achievers who are constantly motivated.
Mhm.
Um, and what prevents from that is really fear,
Hmm.
uh, which is kind of the actual topic we want to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Because how does this develop, right? When we grow up as little boys and girls,
Hmm.
we want to be loved by our parents, and our parents or our guardians are like the it of the world. Like if they
Hmm.
go, we're done, right? There's no food, there's no providership, there's nothing. Little babies can't do anything. So we want their approval, like our life depends on it.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is, when we draw a little picture, it's like, oh, little Sally, what a beautiful picture. Good girl, right? It's like
Hmm.
a little boy, draws something, paints something, creates something. It's like, oh my God, what an amazing job you did. It's like such an amazing kick, such an amazing throw, whatever. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, you're such a good boy, right? And when we sit and we don't do anything, or when we read, or when we play, or when we do something, I haven't seen parents, at least not on mass level, it's like, oh my God, you're such a good, boring girl for playing and sitting quietly,
Hmm.
for not doing anything, right? So
Hmm.
from there, we automatically get programmed that when I do something, I get approved and I
Yeah.
get love, validation, etc. Right? So then we become basically the program gets ingrained in childhood that I get loved when I do something.
Hmm.
And then, of course, when we grow up in school and everywhere else, this performance, this constant seeking for performance gets so ingrained in us that it becomes, I am what I do.
Hmm.
And if I don't do anything, then who I am,
Hmm.
then I'm basically nothing. And so I think this is the kind of combining the two ideas is that the fear of being nothing
Hmm.
is what prevents, like, if I stop performing, if I stop doing, I'm going to stop receiving love.
From others as well as from myself.
Right.
Hmm.
From others, and mostly exactly because that program is running, like
Hmm.
without conscious conversation about it, it's coming on the unconscious level that if I sit down, then I'm a lazy failure
Hmm. Yeah.
and not no good of a person or
Hmm.
not a contributive member of society.
Yeah, so it's interesting that because we're programmed to do things, if we don't do things, there's the fear of not being seen as lovable from the outside, but also not kind of question who I am then if from the inside as well, if I'm not doing things.
Yeah.
So in this paradigm, then contentment becomes a like a handicap. Like, why would I have contentment? How does it help me to be content if the goal of my life is to perform, is to do things? Having contentment only slows me down. Then why would I even ask for it? Why would I search for it?
Yeah. Wow. Like you like basically nailed it on the head. Exactly.
Mm.
Right. And these are kind of, excuse the French, messed up programs that we have running on an unconscious basis where if I'm happy where I am and I stop performing, what does that mean about me? I'll become a failure and a nobody.
Mm.
So in a way, like I'm actually keeping my contentment and happiness away in order to be lovable, likable, to be somebody.
It becomes like a carrot dangling on a stick, always in the future for me to keep going there. So I perform, so I do things, but never really reaching it, so that I don't settle.
Exactly. And
Mm.
and there's I've done a lot of work researching my brain physically
Mhm.
and in various tests that were being performed, like testing my brain, etc. Um, the doctors and kind of the scientists, they were basically saying that a lot of high achievers, we actually get addicted to stress hormones.
Mm.
like it gives us some kind of a meaning or a rush. It's like, okay, because I'm stressed, that means I'm doing something. That means I'm being somebody who is worthy of love and significance.
It's interesting. I think it's so pervasive then. I mean, I'm just thinking about my recent experience with just a couple of days ago. I quit drinking caffeine. I've been drinking it for a month, and it doesn't do me well. I just can't really tolerate it well. And what I reflect back now, two days ago, I was so anxious, and it felt like appropriate because everybody else around me was also kind of in that anxious energy as well. So maybe there is an addiction that it gives a certain sense of like everybody's running and I'm running too, so I must be doing something right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting that there can be actually an addiction to in the on the level of the brain. Hmm. I wanted to ask you about, just to shift gear a bit, about emotions, because you wrote interesting things about emotions, and usually what you hear is that we need to accept our emotions or we need to change our emotions. But what you said actually is, there's a very interesting phrase you said, that to eat an uncomfortable emotion is the most delicious meal without wanting to get rid of it. um, I think this is not an experience many people have with their uncomfortable emotions. Eating it as the most delicious meal without wanting to get rid of it. So, what what an uncomfortable emotion means, in your opinion, when it arises? What's the meaning of it, if there's a meaning to it?
Yeah, so the bigger meaning here, and here we got to talk a little more spiritual concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So my view of the world, uh, a bit of theoretic, but yet I practice it in my life, that if we are these non-physical beings, like we are these souls or energy beings,
Mm-hmm.
and we're here having a body, that means we're here to have an experience inside of the body. And there's a wonderful Pixar movie, Soul,
Mm-hmm.
that I picture even right now. Is like when that little soul and blue little thing is walking around, and it's like it's trying to eat a pizza
Mm-hmm.
and it just passes through it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what is this? Like, I want to taste the pizza. Like, I don't feel the pizza, right? So, in a way, we're here to feel the pizza,
Mm-hmm.
to experience the pizza. But what most people also kind of get programmed is that, okay, then we're here to only experience the good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we want to not experience the bad stuff. And this is where I actually say that if we are a soul and loving being that is only love and only like unconditional acceptance and just knows everything what's going to happen in the future, right? It's like infinite, unlimited being. We are actually here to experience both the process of creation or manifestation or making change happen,
Mm-hmm.
including the process of travel. Because like if we don't have a body, like I can, flip a finger and I can just switch my camera to be, now I'm watching Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're here to both actually have the time experience of traveling from point A to B, of having the time experience of starting a business and watching it grow and having the challenges that's going to have to get to a certain point. Similarly, we are here to both learn about love by experiencing what is not love,
Mm-hmm.
by experiencing the opposite, right? And if we are love always, we want to go and experience certain emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And a perfect example is if you're bored, hey, what do you want to do? Hey, let's go watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of movie do you want to watch? Ooh, let's watch a drama, the one
Mm-hmm.
that makes us cry. Let's watch a horror movie that's gonna make us freak out. And uh, that is to me what we're here for. We're here watching the movies of your life to have the emotional experience that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
And here we're talking about all of the emotions, basically the entire range of it, guilt, shame, fear, hate, being terrified, etc. And the main question, or the main thing that pretty much I am passionate about sharing with the world is, if you learn and master the skill of actually feeling and loving in any emotion, that's it. Life becomes beautiful. And to me, kind of examples, I am angry as heck
Mhm.
at something my girlfriend did, at something somebody else did, at myself, at somehow the circumstances happening. And I'm loving it. And I'm being so present. I'm not being so overcome by the chemicals in the body, but I'm actually watching myself be angry. Or if I lose a loved one and there's this overwhelming sense of grief, right? It's like, the most low feeling of an emotion, right? And yet there is a possibility to be so present to that emotion of sorrow and grief that you can allow love feeling that.
Mm.
It's like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
It's so brilliant how you put it. So it becomes any emotion then becomes like, our goal is to experience the full spectrum, because if we only knew love, there would not be a full spectrum. We would only know one side of it. And when we experience an emotion then that we label negative, it sounds to me that there is a certain, I wouldn't call detachment, but there is more, there is a gap where we can notice the emotion, where we can watch ourselves experiencing it, but we don't become an emotion so that it completely subsumes us.
Mhm.
Is it correct to say that there is a gap, like we kind of step back from the emotion and we watch it, or do we go even fuller into it? Like we just, and by doing that, we kind of transmute it or change it.
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, it's like happening in stages. So there's like self-awareness, so finding yourself where you are in that
Mm-hmm.
emotion, right? Um, and then what happens with a lot of spiritual people, a lot of people on a healing journey, we actually learn to disassociate with our body while it's going through the painful experience.
Mm-hmm.
So like all of this, there's a lot of people who teach, right, love and light. It's like, oh, you're too negative for me. When those types of people, they still have emotions when they experience them, or they, like, when they allow them to come up, as you mentioned, it's like we escape,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, let the body deal with that stuff while I'm gonna just float over there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the actual thing is to learn to love it to the point that you're fully there. It's like, oh my God, I'm so angry right now, I want to punch through the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh wow, the anger, such a lovely energy. It gives so much like power to act, to say no, to push our boundaries. Like, I guess finding benefit in that. And a lot of people that I speak to on the beginning journeys is like, the biggest fear is being overcome by the emotion that they're going to lose control.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
What do you say to them if somebody says, and it may sound so legitimate, if somebody says like, I'm being really angry with my girlfriend and I'm afraid that if I completely allow myself to be angry, like what if I do something and I regret?
Yeah.
Is it something a person needs to experience and really test for themselves and see that it doesn't really, they don't lose their mind? Or what would you usually say to a person?
It's like stages. So in a way, our first experience is to experience so much anger to the point that we're not aware of it, to the
Mm,
point that we actually do want to, damage people and things.
mm,
And that is an experience of itself. So in a way, if you feel guilty or shame about something you've done in the past for, you know, the anger that you blew up at someone, the thing to understand here is that you actually, as a soul, came here to experience what it feels like to have so much rage in your body that you're going to cause pain and hurt to somebody else.
mm,
And you needed to experience that just for the sheer um, kind of to see how that feels, to
mm,
see how that is, to see how much far you can get from being not love to see and choose. Then it was like, oh, do I want to be there, or do I want to now make my way slowly back in, right? And then once people sort of begin this journey of having these conversations, listening to the stuff, and discovering what the emotions are, then it's a simple conversation discovery that it's not the person or it's not the thing that's making you angry. Something happens and anger comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's no longer, you're no longer trying to, beat the girlfriend or beat the boss because they made you angry. No, something happened on the outside and you feel anger.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, let's feel it. And then once it becomes safe to feel it, and it becomes not a thing to get rid of, and it becomes a safe experience, then sort of you're actually taking the control back from the emotion. So in a way, it's like definitely people have experienced where they lost control to the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
but only because they've given so much power away to it, thinking that other people made them feel certain ways.
Mm. So it's not seeing the emotion arises within them, but rather seeing that another person has the cause of the emotion, and therefore the emotion is completely dependent on what the other person does or says. And uh,
Right.
it's interesting because I think many people have an experience of going consciously or unconsciously, going deep into an emotion instead of trying to avoid it or change it or resist it. And the common experience, I think, is that it changes very quickly. Like you said, with fear, it's like this atomic energy. It has a lot of potential that really just blows up, and then it changes into something else. But then I think we forget about this experience, and then we get back to trying to not feel it, or trying to change it, or trying to do something not to kind of come close to it. It's interesting that also I think that is there some conscious need to remind yourself when you feel angry, for example, like if is there an almost instinctive um, reaction to pull back from it, like to step back, to not feel it, and you need to remind yourself like no, go in, feel it in fully.
Yeah. This is the I call it the feelings gym.
The feelings.
Right.
That's
It's
good. Yeah.
developing the feeling muscle. Similarly, like if you are not a gym goer, right? You look at those crazy people who like cause pain to themselves. It's like, what's wrong with them, right?
Mm,
But then as you start working out and you're initially your muscles hurt,
mm,
right? Initially it's painful. Like first
mm,
time in the gym, first 2 weeks, like you're just hurting. But if you move through that with a personal trainer or maybe with a accountability buddy, whatever, it's very similar to how like the emotional muscle works. It,
mm,
in a metaphor like this, right? It's like after the initial painful experiences, then you get to the point where you wake up in the morning and your muscles are hurting because you haven't got to the gym.
mm,
As in, you get addicted to the workout pain, so to say, or you learn to love it so much because you know it makes you feel good, makes you better. That's actually healthy for your body. So, kind of, I love bringing this analogy in is like for people who are just learning on this, emotional journey. It's like going to the gym. So, you love it or hate it, movement we need for the health of the body, and same thing, movement of the energy. So, initially, it might hurt, and then you get to love it.
mm, mm. It's a very good analogy, I think, because also, so I'm curious, just before I ask this, you say at some point it starts to hurt if you didn't go to the gym, because you get used to the high of going there
Mhm.
and working out. What would be the analogy with emotions here? Like at some point after you work with them, it starts to hurt
Yeah, it's
if you avoid it, maybe if you step back instead of allowing yourself to feel, if you fight with it.
I'm kind of trying to recall an experience for myself or something. It's just something that came from my mind right now, this
Mm.
that'll hurt not to go to the gym. And I think in this case, it will hurt if we're not authentic.
Mm.
I think it'll just begin to bother us more if we do not express the emotion that we feel in the moment.
Mm.
And I think we'll notice it and we'll be weirded out by it if we don't express how we feel. And in a way, it's like, okay, you know what? Like I'm going to close off and I'm going to go feel my shit and I'll come back to you. So
Mm. It's almost like it's bottling up and it just doesn't feel good if we don't express it. We don't feel authentic, and maybe the emotion doesn't get a release, so it's not also not very pleasant in the body if it's still lingering there.
yeah, I think maybe that's what it is. We become more sensitive to the stuff being bottled up inside. And
Mm.
we're like, okay, I'm feeling something. I don't like it. I want to get it out. It's actually interesting how it's coming
Mm.
out right now in this conversation.
Yeah. What would you say? It's I think it's clear with strong emotions like fear or anger or anxiety. But if somebody is experiencing like a low grade dissatisfaction, and you can't really put a label to the emotion, how would you sit with it? Would you try to first decipher like what is the emotion? How would you go about it if it's not a clearly defined emotion?
Um, that's a challenge I'm having with working with people where if this conversation is taken out of context, at one point I'll say, well, ask the emotion what it means and
Mm.
what can you do about it to let the emotion go? As in, right, as if we're trying to fix the emotion or make it change or go away, right?
Mm.
But there's also part of it where you simply be with the emotion
Mm.
and not do anything. And there's absolutely no logic or mind to it. There's simply just, okay, that's how I feel. And so it's this balance between, okay, which stage are you at? Have you had enough feeling? Let's take a look. Why are you feeling that? And maybe there's like a shift in perception or behavior, or maybe the emotion is trying to tell you it's like, okay, time to speak up to your mom, or maybe instead time to reach out to, a relationship that you've had or something.
Mm.
Or it could be just, well, just feel it. And I'm getting to the point that the emotion that you're feeling is your absolute truth in the moment.
Mm.
As in, it's like, well, why you feel angry? Like you shouldn't be feeling angry.
Mm.
Like what's wrong with you? Like why are you seeing things that are making you feel angry right now? Right. But it's like, no, I feel angry right now. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter why.
Mhm.
That's my truth. Can it be okay for me to feel angry right now?
Mm. Yeah, it's not. I think we're all guilty of giving this advice, and also we have been on the receiving end of this advice of why you're feeling angry, and it doesn't really help. Like if a person's feeling angry, it's the last thing they want to hear is like why you shouldn't be angry. Like it doesn't
Mm.
really help.
Yeah.
But I guess what just occurred to me is from the outside perspective, it may seem like so strange that the person's feeling angry because it seems maybe that there is absolutely um, no reason for it. But and maybe it's also an interesting question to ask you. What do you think? Um, can an emotion just does it always have reason behind it, or can it just appear out of nowhere and has to have nothing to do with any of this outside circumstances or at all?
um, from what I know about human design and speaking with people, and both having experienced inside of my body and
Mm.
having been around women, especially on the women cycle,
Mm.
emotions can just arrive,
Mhm.
and no amount of ice cream is going to assist.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, then it becomes even more important to learn how to be with an emotion, um, rather than trying to fix it, because there is maybe nothing in the outside circumstances that will help to fix it, because it did not come because as a response to something. It just arose on its own.
Right. And actually, for this, what's coming up for me to share is that let's say we have our soul, our higher mind, higher intelligence, right? The way it communicates with us, it doesn't whisper into the ear with
Mm-hmm.
words, right? The way it communicates is through energy. And it's our body that translates that energy signal like an antenna, radio receiving a radio signal. It translates it. And the way it receives it, like similar how cell phone tower sends a signal, our phone vibrates and translates it into a picture and a phone call, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for us. Our higher mind, our soul, whatever, higher intelligence, sending us is like, okay, you've been trying to go towards this project, and we thought that that person over there is going to invest money into this project, and you will continue going. But because in a way we have free will, that person decided not to,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided to go another way. So for you now to proceed with this project doesn't make sense anymore. Like that road just closed because of that person's free will.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, our experience, we were driven by this project, and all of a sudden we lose energy. We lose
Mm-hmm.
motivation to go after it. Nothing happened in the outside. There's still like people are loving what we're doing and everything else, but I lost energy for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I've learned to perceive it is that, okay, that means the communication came from the higher mind saying some roadblock appeared. And so now pull back, like stop trying to force things.
Mm-hmm.
Let us figure it out. Like maybe we'll get some other people to do, their stuff. And instead, once you slow down and you release that project, we're going to give you a little to go this way,
Mm-hmm.
open the door to go this way. So in that way, I've learned to trust my emotion as the 100% true compass for me. If it's out, it's out. Okay, that means we're holding.
Has it been difficult to learn to trust it 100%? Because I imagine sometimes, I mean, the mind is really loud and saying, like, you just need to keep going. Even if you don't feel motivated, especially in our culture where not feeling motivated is not like it's not a sign to stop. It's sign maybe to keep pushing even harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've sat with that question, right? Do we trust or do we not trust our emotions?
Mm.
Because in the high achiever world, right, it's like in the military, in some of the emergency response, like people are actually being trained to ignore the emotion, stuff the
Mm.
emotion away. Right now, time for action. Right? It's your training in the moment that's going to get you going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to have this conversation. It's like, okay, but there's this different understanding between how do we connect with that emotion. So I'll give you an example, maybe from my life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe last few weeks, maybe last month, I had an experience where my entire body, my entire emotional system and mental system was screaming, "Get me out of here!"
Mm-hmm.
It was uncomfortable, difficult conversation in a relationship. It was an uncomfortable situation to be in. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm more on the anxious or avoidant attachment style. I'm more on the avoidant, so I tend to close off, go back into my foxhole. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my natural response to the discomfort that was occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, with the human design understanding of what our true compass is, some people is different. Some people, we all may have different ways to communicate with that inner signal. To me, it was like I'm in the human design, the sacral response, where it's like and I asked,
Mm-hmm.
like my entire body, my emotional system actually is screaming, I want to leave,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm asking, is like, okay, is it the right time for me to go? And I'm getting no,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, damn it, right? And it's
Seems you're
like, is
staying.
this find balance between these two parts? Which one is actually saying the truth and which one is not? And then I asked, okay, is this the right time for me to stay then? And it's developing this muscle for this inner compass to go through maybe the emotional turmoil when it may not be the right thing to follow the emotion,
Mm. So it's
including
yeah.
starting a business and you're freaking afraid of rejection or failure or how it's gonna, people are gonna yell at you, etc. like in that moment, that emotion needs to actually, maybe that emotion needs to be felt
Hmm.
more than hide away from it.
Hmm.
And actually, what's coming to me right now in the moment, same thing happened to me in that situation, that it was more important for me to feel the uncomfortable emotion
Hmm.
than to get out of the situation.
In that moment, it wasn't saying to you that you need to get out, but it was there for you to experience it and to stay with it.
More, right?
Hmm.
Which I've also seen people in this conversation being stuck um, in like abusive relationships, like
Hmm.
actual physical and emotional and verbal abuse, right? And people are like, okay, I'm working through my emotions with this narcissistic abuser, right? It's like, and no, in those times, like maybe you need a second person to help you figure out what it is that you actually want, what your
Hmm.
emotions are actually telling you. Because in those scenarios, no, you gotta get the heck out and you gotta get the boundaries straight.
Hmm. Because maybe
So
they're so enmeshed that it's really hard to differentiate where is that person's emotions and the abuser's emotions.
exactly. And for them at that point, it's like it's safer to be with the known abuse
Hmm.
than the fear of the unknown.
Hmm.
And so I haven't found a formula, in this case, do
Hmm.
this. I think that's what makes life beautiful, is that um, when one person feels a certain thing in a situation, for them would be one set of right actions, and for another person, same circumstance, same feelings, for them would be a different. So I haven't seen a good or bad. And again, this may be coming from that it's the communication from the higher mind through this energetic communication that gets translated in the body, that for some person we actually need to go into the conflict, and for another person we actually need to get out of it
Hmm.
to find the least
Hmm.
resisting
No,
path.
I also wanted to ask you in relation to that. You said that how to navigate life using the human physical mind and the higher mind that communicates through emotions and intuition. So I'm curious, in this setup, what is the role of the mind as we conceive it, like of our thinking, and is it a tool to navigate life, or it has a completely different role? Like what is a healthy relationship to our thinking? If we think of going somewhere, but our thoughts tell us not to go, um, is there any merit to listening to them, or they're completely not for that? What do you think about that?
Easy questions, huh?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I asked the ones that I would really love to find the answers for.
That's the
Yeah.
story, for yourself, right? um so what I'm and I can only speak from my personal experience. um I was stuck in my thinking before,
Hmm.
for a long time, right? um to the point where I start, okay, well, mind is an enemy and I need to
Hmm.
beat it into submission and quiet it and do everything. So I spent a lot of time fighting with my mind with that too. And again, this is a paradox where it's kind of both, but when we allow the mind to take the seat of complete trust that it is taken care of,
Hmm.
I think is when it grows into the beautiful machinery that it really is. Because it was never meant to keep us safe our entire lives,
Hmm.
but it took on that role,
Hmm.
right? The world is unsafe, and the mind is like, okay, I'm going to make sure that you're going to be safe.
Hmm.
And so then the overthinking goes on.
Hmm.
But if we shift the foundational thing that it's actually world is safe, I'm safe, um, and whatever happens is actually for the best of everybody concerned, and I'm okay with any outcome, and I'm okay with any emotion that that outcome makes me feel,
Hmm.
right? Once we get to this essentially absolute unconditional acceptance of whatever is happening, then the mind becomes free. Its capacity uh, is released to stop worrying about how things are going to turn out. Then it's like, okay, the shower stopped working. Okay, cool. What do we got?
Mhm.
And then we go, it's like, okay, it could be, something in the basement. Is the water shut off? Is the electricity on? Like, is the pump? What? Then it's the proper use of the mind. And kind of, I want to mention here as well that the question then about planning and goal setting, right? It's like if the mind was never designed to plan for life or make sure that things work, well, right now in the moment, if it is your most interesting thing to plan for the future and plan ahead, good, go ahead, do it right now. The mind being right here in the moment will do an amazing job planning.
Mhm.
But then take away the responsibility for it, for life to go according to the plan that was created last week.
Mhm.
That was the plan last week. Today, there's a new thing. And once there's a new curveball coming in, okay, mind, you're in the moment right now. How are we dealing with this curveball? We're not trying to stick to the plan that we had a week ago. We just
Mhm.
got a new set of circumstance. What are we doing? And I think that's when the absolute brilliance of this human machinery can make wonders.
Mhm. It's a brilliant answer, and I am really love that you said that you went through a stage of trying to quieten the mind, and then it seems like you have worked out a relationship where the mind is not an enemy, but it's a tool that has been misused or uh, took a role that it wasn't supposed to take of keeping us alive and safe. And it can really still be a beautiful tool when we have a right relationship with them, with the mind. Mm, yeah, it's very interesting that. Yeah, what comes up for me is I had this recently, a couple of days ago, an experience with I was scheduling a call with somebody, and then it appeared to me that it was just a friendly conversation, that she was not really interested in having that conversation. So I went based on that, and then I clarified with her. I said, it appears to me that you're not really interested. And then she said, no, I just wanted to ask you questions rather than sharing about myself. And I said, it just showed me that the mind is creating stories that are completely unrelated to reality many of the times. And at that moment, I realized that I base my actions on the stories that are just purely mind created. That, like in this sense of, in the case of this person, like I assumed that she didn't want to, but it was actually not the case. And at that moment, I felt like, how can I trust it? Like, how can I really trust what it says? Like, what is the relationship to have with it? Um, and I can't say that I'm still looking for an answer. But what you said now helps to 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 see that when the burden is taken of it, to ensure that we survive, then it can kind of relax into almost feels like a more mellow state, a more relaxed state of dealing with responsibly with situations rather than trying to like strike preemptively whatever may happen, really being anxious and
Mhm.
fearful about the future.
Yeah. So it's like it's a perfect example. And thank you for bringing it up. It's um, the anticipation how the conversation is going to go was never the mind's job.
Mm.
This is what it was doing in order to keep you safe from rejection, from wherever.
Yeah.
And instead, look how brilliantly it opened up when you just allowed to be present and it asked, "Hey, I'm feeling this. How are you actually doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And then that opened up. Like,
Mm.
you know, that question, where it come from? Your mind came up with it, or
Mm.
like your mind as an antenna received that wave,
Mm.
thought at that time, and it was the perfect thing that helped you see the world in a different way.
Yeah. I think we often don't really go with clarifying our assumptions. And so we kind of not, it's not always easy to clarify it with if the person is not very close. If maybe it's a first time conversation, you wouldn't ask the person, I have a sense you don't really want to have it. So we can, in this case, like base our actions on the assumption and never find out the assumption wasn't true in the first place. But in this situation, yeah, it really showed me that if it's not true in this situation, what if it's not true in then tomorrow and the week after and the month after, when I have an idea to do something and the mind says like, don't do it because of whatever, because of what might happen. And then I can look back and say, if that assumption wasn't true, like what makes me think that this assumption is true?
Yeah.
And then just before the conversation, I just thought that what if we live without really, just in flow, maybe we could call it in flow, or we just do things that feel right in the moment, but we don't think about them, because it feels to me the moment we start thinking about it, the mind starts coming up with all the buts and no's and what ifs, and kind of the idea dies on the vine. But if a person just moves towards it, and it doesn't have to be the perfect thing to do in the moment, but it kind of feels like a person, you're being in action, so you start doing this and maybe doing that, and eventually you get to some activity that feels right. But I have an experience of overthinking that I can sit for a long time thinking about what's the right thing to do in the moment, and it gets me nowhere. But if I just started doing something, like it would be much shorter way, even though the mind maybe freaks out because it doesn't know, it doesn't see the way. It doesn't know how is it going to help.
Yeah. Kind of what comes up to say around that is, how does the mind operate, right? It's like, to talk about the principles of the mind, the way I see it now, I had confusion for a long time between what causes emotions causes thinking, or thinking causing emotion, right?
Yeah.
And from all my experiences, sometimes it was emotions causing thinking, and then sometimes thinking causing emotions. And I'm like, okay, well, it's another paradox. Freaking, there's not a yes or no. I wish there was. Like, people asking for practical ways. I'm like, I don't have a yes or no thing. But in this scenario, I love that you mentioned assumptions. With the assumptions that you have, no wonder you're feeling the way you're feeling, and no wonder you're thinking the way you're thinking. So it's not to think out of your way, it is to look at the assumptions. Because in a way, it's also, if we talk about that, thoughts, it's not that we generate thoughts. In a way, what if the mind is like the antenna that tunes into a frequency where thoughts are? Right? Then it's not for us to change the thinking, because that radio station is playing. We can't change the next song on that radio station. We need to change the radio station we're tuned into. And that's done through both the feeling and also understanding the assumptions that we're driving through. And I think you and I both are coming to the point that discovering the unconscious assumptions that have been driving our life is like the key work that we can do.
Would you say those are beliefs, unconscious beliefs we have about how reality works?
Basically, beliefs, perceptions, like all of the stuff, how we see reality, how we see ourselves, who we are, what our purpose, like all of this stuff, because that drives the emotions and the thoughts. And so the cool part here is, the way I see it now, we don't actually need to do anything about it, because the way the loving reality is constructed is that we are all moving towards love, even sometimes through to experiencing what is not love. So if shit hits the fan, that circumstance is going to make us feel bad. Damn it, I got to clean the shit off the fan. Right? And while you're cleaning, you got to find out where the shit was flying from. In like very direct metaphor, I guess. And we don't need to do anything. Life is doing that for us already.
Mm.
So in a way, if we allow all the circumstance and if we allow the emotion that's going to come, we're going to find out what's actually causing and creating all of this stuff.
How would that practically look like? Sitting with an emotion when an uncomfortable situation arises and we feel uncomfortable. Well, being with that emotion will create some clarity about what's the underlying cause, or maybe journaling about it, sitting quietly and thinking about it, or maybe there are different ways for different people.
Again, yeah, this is the paradox. Different stuff. Like for
Mm.
example, in one relationship, it would be like, you know, couple is fighting, and in one relationship, the woman or the guy would say, it's like, I'm done with it. I'm done with fighting. I don't
Mm.
want to fight anymore. I'm out. Right? It's like we've had our stuff. And then in a different relationship, it might be the opposite. It's like, I'm done with fighting, so I'm going to love you now.
Mm.
Right? Again, it's a paradox depending on your situation, how it's going to be.
Mm.
But the fighting caused the feeling, allowed the feeling to come up and allowed you to shift the assumption that, you know, relationships need fighting.
Mm.
It's like, I'm done with relationships need fighting. Now I want relationships that's loving.
Mm.
And then whatever the action that's going to come from that, whether leave or, you know, shift the way you are in the relationship, that's
Mm.
it. Once you had enough, it shifts.
So there's nothing to be done then in this situation, in this example, to clarify that I'm done with fighting. Does it just happen on its own that at some point it's just enough, and then some new understanding comes up, and it suddenly, as a moment of insight, the person realizes like I'm done with fighting. It just doesn't make any sense anymore.
Mm. Again, another paradox is like, you know, high achievers, people who think they're in control,
Mm.
they want to stay in control. And if I'm going to say, it's like, there's nothing for you to do. Life is
Mm.
going to change on its own. And I'll give you the perfect set of circumstances, events, and people for you to make the connections that are going to be made. Right. And it will also help relieve the pressure from some of the high achievers and maybe some of the people who are on a similar journey, like we have been trying to fix ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
that there is nothing to fix.
Mm.
This is the journey we're on. And what is happening is the exact perfect thing that needs to be happening. And if you allow it to happen, it'll happen quicker.
Mm.
Right? Oh my God, I'm afraid of growing my business. At some point, it's like, okay, I'm done being afraid. It could be, I don't care how people are gonna treat me anymore because I'm done treating myself like this
Mm.
at some point. And
Mm.
then if it's not there yet, it's okay. Then kind of what I mentioned is like enjoy the experience of fear.
Mm. So there's no speeding it up rather than just being with an emotion.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like the more you learn to love it, the faster it goes.
Mm.
Which is
Mm.
also a sad thing sometimes for relationships, right? It's like the more we love our kids, and then the faster they grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it can alleviate so much anxiety and pressure from many people who hearing this, because there's almost a universal, I think, assumption that there's something we need to change about ourselves, or we need to change about our experience so that to make it somewhat more perfect or as it should be. But what you're saying is it will it's already changing on its own. We just need to leave it and to be with it rather than try to kind of to make it into something. It's like a river. It's carrying us to where we need to go. We just need to allow it to carry us, but not to paddle somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way kind of the quickest shift that I see is opening up for people is okay, I don't like how situation is. I gotta change it. Right. This is how
Mm.
most people relate to it. And I'm inviting, what if the situation is the way it is for you to see something about yourself?
Mm.
to see the assumptions, the beliefs, the perceptions that we have been programmed with.
Mhm.
An example, I just had a wonderful call with a young gentleman, frustrated that there's no clarity of what to do next. Right? I got to
Mhm.
do something, but there's nothing, and I'm frustrated. It's like I want to do something, but like there's nothing happening. And what do I do? Right? It's like I can't just sit. So my initial recommendation was like, well, just sit with what is, right? It's like, but I
Mhm.
can't. Like the mind doesn't allow. Okay, well, what if then things are happening the way they're happening for you to start looking within,
Mhm.
to finding love for yourself just as you are, to find out who the authentic you is. And what we got to, the mind is asking the question, what should I do? Versus, what do I feel like doing right now?
Mhm.
Right? If you don't know what you should do, that means you need to learn to feel what you feel like doing right now,
Mhm.
and allow it to, and learning that it's okay if it's going to be the most judgmental thing that you've come to, right? It's like all of the lazy stuff that lazy people do,
Mhm.
including bad stuff, drinking addictions and everything else. It's like
Mhm.
shouldn't. Anyways.
I love how it changes the that intermediary stage before the person knows what to do. It becomes, instead of being like a dead, almost dead time, that the person wants to get out as soon as possible to get to the place where they know what to do and so they can get in action. You asking this question helps it to the person to see that this situation is teaching me something, and I can almost like I can use it in me. In the meanwhile, I can use the situation to learn something about myself, and there will be a point where I know what to do. And I think everybody knows that at some point they will know what to do, but it's this space before that happens that's uncomfortable. Like I feel like I should
Mhm.
know right now and I don't, and that the mind keeps spinning. But what you're asking is like, see what you can learn from it. So use this time, and almost becomes, yeah, it completely transforms this discomfort of not knowing what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it became my pet peeve to talk about patience.
Mm.
A lot of people is like, well, especially in spiritual circles and even some of the human design conversations I've had, it's like, well, there's nothing for you to do, just be patient,
Mm.
right? Be patient until you die. And
Mm.
and to me, this patience and impatience is coming from the same space that I don't want to be where I am right now. I want to be there.
Mm. I see.
Like the only cause of needing patience and the only cause of impatience is I want to get out of where I am right now.
Mm.
And what if where you are right now is the exact perfect place for you to be?
I love this question. It's such a beautiful question that and then completely transforms the person's state of being whenever, wherever they are, whatever they're experiencing.
Yeah. So it's like whenever I see patience for some reason, like automatically, it's like, okay, come back in the moment. What am I not liking right now? Why do I want to be on vacation 6 months down the road? Why do I want to skip the next 6 months of what I think is going to be misery? What if I came back to this moment right now, learn to be with the misery, learn to
Mm.
love the misery? And then once you learn to love the misery, that's it. There's no escaping but freaking love.
Mm. I'm
And I
curious to
guess,
throw it just to see what you think about it, because it occurred to me that um, I'm reading a book called Presence by Rupert Spira, and what he's saying that basically the happiness and peace and love are our natural condition that gets veiled by the mind seeking or resisting. So in this example you gave, a person would feel happy going on vacation 6 months after, but in between, until it happens, there will be this seeking and resisting what they're going through, having to wait 6 months and seeking to get there to when they can finally go on vacation. And what he's saying that it's not the vacation that gives happiness, but it's rather the end of seeking that happens when we get what we want. So in that case, the person going on vacation feels happy, not because they go on vacation, but because they finally stop seeking something and they can finally be where they are. But then, of course, it happens again, and then the vacation ends, and etc.
Yeah.
And that I think that question you ask is like, what if this is the perfect place for you to be, helps a person to get back and kind of stops the search. It stops the trying to get someplace, and that brings a relief. I think almost. I mean, even now, hearing to this, like trying it on, as you're saying, just imagine it. It brings a bodily relief. I think of like, wow, almost like the shoulders are going down, and like there's a sign of relief, because suddenly now, instead of being a place to get out of, to get to another place which is better, now becomes like, wow, what if this is the perfect place for me to be? And there's a powerful transformation, I think, in the way to see the present moment.
Yeah. And why that happens is, like, I'm watching it specifically for people who are being taken away relationships, being taken away money and health, right? Basically, these three things that are taken away from us. I watch people, those things being taken away from them, like being taken away from them by life. And I'm like watching from the outside, whether we work together or not, I am looking for them as I wonder why this is being done to them, with them, for them. And most of the time, like, I'm able to find things where, we're not giving business clarity or business success right now because we feel so unworthy that if we were given more clients, we wouldn't have any boundaries. We would work ourselves into burnout and cause even more stuff. Right? We have been our lives so hard on ourselves that if we were to be given more, it would burn us down. In the relationships, we're not given the relationship because if the way you are showed up in the relationship, the perfect guy who we have prepared for you is not going to stand you.
So it's like a safety
right?
switch, a safety mechanism to prevent,
right.
the person from when they're not ready for it yet.
So it's like it's an awesome question. And then really kind of, this is coming back to the initial question, where would motivation come from if we stop the seeking? Actually, what's coming up for you right now? Like, in your experience right now, as you're finding this relief in the moment, where does motivation, inspiration come from?
I think it comes from like, if a person, if I don't need anything, I don't need to get to a place where I feel happy, if I don't need to get something from the outside world, from people, to feel happy, if I'm just being happy, the only motivation is to express it, to share it with others, to express myself, to create something, so to help others, perhaps. So it's a shift in energy, right? From trying to grasp something to feel the whole inside of me, coming instead from fullness and just sharing it with others, and but not trying to get something. So I think I'm not sure people would call it motivation, because I think motivation, or at least maybe in my mind, motivation is something that helps us to get something, like to get to a place so we can get something. But here it's more of like being moved or unfolding, or just being in flow, and it's a different energy, I think.
Yeah, it's like there's, instead of pushing, it's pulling.
Yeah.
Or different words. Inspiration, drive, blah blah.
Yeah. I was asking myself this question. I was because it seemed, again, and maybe the mind, the current state the mind was in, but it seemed to the mind like, if I'm happy, what is, I will probably like, what is the point to do anything? I will just remain in that, bask in that feeling of happiness, bask in contentment, and I wouldn't really do anything. And I think it's such a clever ruse for the mind to use, because it seems so logical. Like of course, then yeah, let's screw happiness. Let's do things. Uh, but I remember we had this conversation about sitting on the couch, and you said, try sitting on the couch for an hour and see, like, it's not easy. Like it's not that easy to sit and do nothing. I think the same here is that at some point, feeling happy, we will want to do things, but it will not come from a place of pushing ourselves or trying to get somewhere, but we will just be moved to do them, and we'll do them because we want to do them.
Yeah, yeah. It was. We had a wonderful experience of this up in the cottage over the last 2 days with a friend of mine. He
Mm,
invited me over, help him like put up a little pergola. I forget,
mm,
like just a little structure.
yeah.
And the way a lot our 2 days went was we would unpack the boxes and sit down with some water, maybe go to the lake, and then we come back, play with the dogs, and pick up the drill and drill some holes, and then do something, and then you know hours go by, and then the next day the thing's up.
Mm,
And it was absolutely, we're not here to do work, we're not here, we're just like here to be.
mm,
And then somehow out of that being, well, there's nothing to do, might as well do something.
mm,
And
mm,
such a different thing than if like the entire corporate industry allowed us, first of all, get the right people in the right places when we all love the work that we do.
mm,
And I strongly believe that the way humanity structured is so perfect that there is a perfect person for every seat.
mm,
And I think there's work, for all kinds of professions. There is
mm,
somebody who would love that. And I
mm,
heard somebody say it's like if you're sitting in a place that you don't want to do, you're actually doing the service to two people
mm,
and impacting two families. It's like one is you,
mm,
but also the other person who is not doing the work that you're doing right now.
mm.
And they would love to. And yeah, so
It's
it's
an
like,
interesting idea. Yeah.
yeah. So from that perspective, it's like if everybody loved what they do and if everybody operated from, um, I do it for the sheer joy of doing it. That's the world I'm creating. I want to live into.
Hmm. It's a beautiful picture to imagine, and really explains why would people do things, because when you're doing the work you love, and why not do it? It's a pleasurable experience. It's not something we have to push ourselves to do, right? So it's finding that work, and being in that state of expressing that love for doing that work.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, like for example, for you, like if you don't mind getting a little more
mm,
personal here, it's like I've known you for a number of years now already,
mm,
and I can't see you just sit there, like
mm,
you just being. You're curious about people, you're curious about life, like you just being. You're gonna go to the street and you're gonna say hello to a person, and the person is gonna open up to you. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm going through something, or like I'm looking for something, and be like, okay, well, what do you got?
mm,
Like, uh, can't help
mm.
but be that.
Yeah, well, thank you for seeing that in me. And I think what I really really not do that from a place of seeking before, because it can also question how can I help can come from a different place of trying to get something from a person, or just really being happy, and just sharing openly, innocently this question with somebody. Mm, yeah, but I know, for some people maybe sitting is not difficult. For me, sitting is quite, it's more difficult sometimes than doing something, and that's why sometimes it can be so fulfilling, because there's growth there, and it means that there's something to grow into, to learn from not doing something.
Mm.
Mm. And at the same time, at some point, I always get moved to do something. It never happened that I got stuck for days and days sitting and I just couldn't stop. No, it happens sooner than later, sooner than the mind fears it will happen.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of, what's your relationship to fear now?
To fear.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking about this recently, and I it 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 changed, I would say, and evolved from first I wanted the fear not to be there. I was waiting for fear not to be there. I was waiting to feel confident. That was a lot of waiting that didn't really help because fear is always a part of life. It's normal. Then it was fighting, and we talked in the beginning of this conversation. Yeah, this fighting. I was fighting fear, like to make it to 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 overcome it or to make myself do something. And now it shifts into um, more of being curious about fear, like fear being like a botanist, and fear is like a rare plant. And I'm really curious about how does it feel. And instead of trying to get away from it, coming even closer to it until it loses its the story around it dissolves, because fear may seem like it's such a powerful, scary thing that we need to overcome, and it's a force over us. But really, what it is for me, I can see is that it's a bodily sensation, and it's a story in our mind. And if the story gets smaller, then what's left is a sensation, and that kind of it doesn't even feel like fear when we sit with it. It just feels like something, but the fear is a label we put on it. Um, So I don't always operate from that place, but it's been really helpful to see that I don't have to fight the fear. I can be really friends with it, like you said about emotions, like see that it's not a problem to get rid of.
Yeah. And in a way, kind of, they say like we're here to master our darkness. One of the potential purposes and possibilities that we're here for. And maybe for you, right, it's like it's what if your life's theme has been to explore fear?
Hmm.
Like what is not love is in a way fear.
Hmm.
And kind of question, when would you know that you've mastered fear?
Hmm. It's an interesting question. I would before I would say that I would know when fear doesn't arise, but now I know I don't I that's not the answer. It will. I would say that when I can love fear, like I can really be friends with fear, I can welcome fear, I can not try to push it away or make it disappear. When I can just stay with it.
Um,
Yeah. So I think it's about changing the relationship with it rather than making it lessen or go away completely.
and that's that famous quote that the greatest thing with fear is the fear itself.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I think this is this the scariest place to be when we fear the fear, like when we're afraid to be afraid, and life gets really so small, like it really becomes like a size of a pea because we're afraid to be afraid. We we don't venture out to try new things because we're afraid of being afraid. Um, so it may seem like life is safe, but it really is not safe. It's really life living in fear, in even greater fear than we would be if we allowed ourselves to feel it.
Yeah. Kind of here's an interesting question. What would happen if you became fear itself?
In the moment when I feel it, or just in general?
What comes up?
Hmm.
Moment or general?
Hmm. What would happen if I became fear? I think, well, there would be no fear in a way. Like it would lose it would lose the label. It would lose the meaning I give it. It would be transmuted, transfigured into something else.
And kind of what do you think? What do you think is Like if that was the mastering fear path,
Mhm.
kind of if you're on this path, like what do you think is there to go?
Yeah. Well, your question definitely helped now to even show that there is the path and the final point to get to, because I did not know where I'm moving with it. I knew where I'm getting away from, but I didn't know where I'm moving. I think it's I think it involves being with emotions, not just fear, but other emotions as well, not trying to make them go away. So it's allowing the emotions more and accepting them. And this conversation helped me see that you said that they all have their purpose. We are here to experience them, so they're not problems to get rid of. And I think in the same way, fear, it's some like what's stopping to change that relationship is still the residue of thinking that fear like shouldn't be happening or should be happening less. Yeah, it's a great questions you asked.
Like
Very
for
interesting.
some reason, it's like what's coming up is like, you know,
Mm,
Yakov, the fear master. He has
yeah.
experienced all kinds of fear from all directions, and now he's
Mm,
able to help guide you through
mm.
the same journey.
Yeah, for some reason I was really interested in fear. I keep asking people about fear. I keep reading about fear. It's something that I think is so fascinating, and maybe, like you said, there's a reason behind it, that there is a life is guiding me somewhere with this. Mhm. What is your relationship with fear? And it was the original question when we had the idea of the interview. It's like, how does it look like now when you have, let's say, an idea of a project or an idea to do something, and fear arises? Like, what do you do with it?
Um, to me, what made a huge part on the way I relate to all of this stuff is existential kink. There's a book, Existential Kink, I
Mm,
think I mentioned,
mm,
where basically the author goes that if we assume that things are here for a reason, then the only time they will go is when they have completed their mission.
mm,
And so, in a way, if the fear is here, then the only way for it to go is for you to fully integrate it and accept it and love it and do all of this stuff. And right now, my methodology in a way that I guide people through is if you can allow all circumstances to come up,
mm,
because certain circumstance will come up to make us feel things. And if you can allow yourself to feel anything and everything that the circumstance will bring up, what is there left to fear?
mm,
And so in a way for me, like in practical, if any fear shows up, okay, this needs to be here. Okay, let's
mm,
go. What does it mean here?
mm,
Ah, interesting. What a
mm.
lovely sensation. Like I'm,
Yeah,
I'm curious what, yeah.
you said something. I just wanted to read this phrase because it's so. You said, including if it's interesting to feel fear and not to do an action. How exciting of an experience this is as well. I found that this is so interesting to see fear this way. So we're not trying to fight it. We're not trying to make it go away, but we're interested in the experience of feeling it. And we're not trying even to do something we're afraid of doing, but we're just staying with fear. So fear does not become like an obstacle we need to get rid of as soon as possible, but becomes an experience by itself. And so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And from there, what if us wanting to start a business,
Mm,
it's not that the fear is in the way. What if us wanting to start the business is for us to feel the fear?
mm. Mhm. Wow, that's a complete shift in perspective. So fear is not simply an unwanted byproduct of starting a business, which will get us someplace, but rather the business is a byproduct of us feeling fear. Wow. I've not come across this kind of thinking before. Well, then it seems like all the emotions suddenly become they have a new significance. They were like things that occur, and you kind of get through them one way or another, and you get to do things. And now emotions they almost come at the forefront of our life, so we can experience them rather than just being in like a background of it.
Mhm. Mhm. What if the girlfriend yelled at you and you became angry in a way, right? What if she yelled at you so that you get angry?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And it's kind of in a way that's my relationship with my girlfriend. It's becoming rare and rare, and depending, like sometimes I go through cycles where I go to even deeper depth that I've ever gone before. And if she helps me get me triggered, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. There's another level of freedom that I'm here accessing.
Mm.
Please bring it on.
I have a sense that life becomes so much. There's so much less to be afraid of if you can accept your emotions and you even welcome them, and you actually seek situations where you can experience them, and then like you said, what is there to be afraid of? Life becomes really an experience rather than a project to get through.
Mhm. All of it, not just
Mm.
one moment of achievement.
Mm. I'm really excited for people who get to to experience your help with them with that, because I think many people have. I mean, it's a radically different way to look at emotions, I think, and emotions is something that everybody has, and I think for high achievers, especially, I think there's a tendency to maybe try to get rid of emotions because they kind of they block the way to doing, and if they can change the relationship to it, it's a complete game changer. So I'm really excited for high achievers who get lucky to experience this shift in perspective and the questions that you asked me. Um, I think it's not an exaggeration to say it's really a life changing change in perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that, we get to be on this journey together.
Mm.
You've helped me, you've assisted me a lot on this as well. And in a way, we're in the same thing. Like as you're mastering this fear and whatever opens up for you,
Mm.
there's so much sharing that we get to help people, right? It's like how much time we've spent in mastering all of these things.
Mm.
Other people, they don't need to master them to guide others. They just need to understand how to guide themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can reflect of all these things that we have experienced,
Mm. I
what a
love this
beautiful world.
idea. I love this idea because I think sometimes we don't really realize how much time and efforts is spent on thinking and learning and going through this type of things, so that other people don't have to do the same, and they maybe don't have time or interest in them.
Mm.
So yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dmitry. It's been
Oh,
every conversation I'm really looking forward to, because it's always an you have such an I feel like your direction sometimes changes. The topics you work with sometimes change, even though it seems like high performance always stay there, and this is who you help with, who you help. But it's always interesting to get a conversation with you on a different point of your path, because there's a new perspective you can share, and we can talk about So thank you for
Yeah.
finding the time for this conversation. I
Oh,
really appreciate
I
it.
love it. I love it. Yeah, no, we can talk for hours. And thank you for the space holding the questions as well. And I'm excited to having more of these
Mm.
and also to see what's going to happen in the next few months for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.